Welcome to Show Studio. It's Milan Fashion Week and we're discussing the show of Milan Fashion Week because it's Prada time, which is, everyone is excited. If you go on social media, all the journalists who are at Milan are like, an hour to go till Prada, half an hour to go till Prada. But we get to soak up all that excitement via their amazing live stream. And I've got an amazing set of women with me to help unpick what Miuccia Prada is doing this season. But I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you.
Hi, my name's Lucy Norris. I'm a trend forecaster and fashion historian.
My name is Madelaine Levy. I am the editor-at-large of Bond magazine and also a freelance fashion writer and consultant.
I'm Marion Hume and I'm the international fashion editor of the Australian Financial Review.
I'm Butchart. I'm a fashion historian, writer and associate lecturer at London College of Fashion.
I'm Harriet Quick. I'm a writer, journalist and consultant for Lane Crawford.
I want to start with a slightly different tack to what I usually do, which is to ask about people's first memories of Prada, because it's one of those brands that I think people feel very emotionally attached to and they tend to remember the first piece of Prada they bought or the first show they went to. Do you guys have any? Marion, I'll go to you first because you're a panel expert, you've been on lots of them, so be confident.
I remember the first show.
Tell me about that.
Well, because of course Prada as a fashion label is, in my terms, not that old.
No, completely.
And so, yeah, the first collection actually, but there wasn't a show. So the first collection of clothes, I can remember quite precisely. But before that, there was always that thing of going to Milan, going to the Galleria, going down to the shopping. You know, it's in a basement. So for anyone that hasn't been there, it's a beautiful kind of but quite small doorway, and then underneath is this cornucopia of gorgeousness underground. So you kind of go down there and it was still luggage and handbags, but we were already very excited about it. So I guess the handbag message was very strong.
It's interesting that you say that because I think because of how sort of important to fashion Miuccia Prada has become, it's kind of like when Marc Jacobs was at Vuitton, people forget that it was a luggage house. I guess that's a credit to how great a designer she is. Harriet, what are your memories of Prada?
Taking me back. I do remember the beautiful silk nylon backpack that became such a cult and in such delicious colours. So I just remember like a butterscotch and a pale blue and beautiful little cashmere jackets with that lovely scrolled label in. Everything was very delicious and the colours were just out of this world and incredible. And the smell actually of the Prada perfume, which sold out immediately and is one of those mythical things that you can't get hold of. The first one, which smelled like money. And sort of season by season, just so many wonderful, wonderful collections.
Why has she become so important? Is it because it always feels new? What is it about Prada? Why do we all look to it?
I mean, in a way, Prada, they operate within something very traditional within the system in many ways. It's not revolutionary in the way it's set up or in the way that it works with a collection and extra pieces. I think it's just really, really great clothes. I think, actually, speaking of memories of Prada, it's not my first one, but one of the most vivid ones is going to Florence and buying some Prada in 1996, and I think at the time, I'd never spent as much money on any clothes. I'm still wearing two of the things that I bought, and I'm still really upset about forgetting that belt that I bought in a Greece hotel in Greece on holiday.
That's the worst feeling when you know
and
it's
not
lurking
having
there.
been able to buy it back. So I guess it's that combination of amazing things for the catwalk and incredibly wearable things that last. Yes.
Give us your take on Prada, Lucy. That's a big question.
Yeah, she means a lot to me as a designer. I view her as a teacher. I learned through Miuccia Prada about film, politics, feminism, she's much more than a fashion designer to me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because also, as we all know, she studied political science before she moved into fashion, and she's always got this sort of vibe of being more than a fashion designer. And do we feel that interest in whether it's feminism or politics or communism, do we feel that always comes through in the collections? It always feels like it's more than clothes. You're nodding.
Yeah, I think it always feels like part of a wider cultural conversation, really, more than, it's not insular. It's the references are drawn from all over the sort of cultural landscape, from politics to performance and sort of everything in between, really. And I think that's that's why her collections work on so many levels, because you've got that sort of cerebral, intellectual element, if you want to take that, and then on the other hand, you've just got some really great clothes.
Really good clothes.
It's like the perfect package.
You're nodding, Marion. Do you agree? Do you like that when you go to a Prada show that you can just swoon, or you can also kind of intellectualize?
I don't swoon during the show. I've got to say, I always sit there, and I'm not someone that gets things instantly. So I always sit there going, what on earth is that? and then by the time I go into the store the next season, you know, if I'm back in Milan, and I will walk around that store and see the most exquisite clothes. So I suppose that's saying it takes a long time for things to make sense to me. But it always does make sense, you know, eventually.
I think that's the thing about Miuccia, is that she's publicly, talked about how she's quite resentful towards the fact that people seem to feel that they can judge her collections on Twitter at the time of show, and actually for her, you know, she said, I've spent sort of, 6 months creating this collection. And it is, if it is new, it isn't going to be easy on the eye. That's the idea of newness, and she has that fascination with ugliness and even ugly nature. She always tries to sort of give it a bit of a curve. So it will take time for our eye to adjust. So I think we're all there at some points, I think that out of all the designers, she jars the eye more than any.
Well, it's always the hardest review to write, isn't it? You leave and you always a bit like, oh God, I've definitely missed something. There's something I'm not getting. And I think
and you're like, oh goodness, I know I'm going to be able to understand this so much more in next time.
We'll have to do a re-Prada panel in like a week's time. We've all had time to think about it.
She doesn't help you either, which I also like. As far as I know, and please if I'm wrong, correct me, but when you turn up at the show, there isn't a press pack that says, I'm inspired by my mother or my trip to Tuscany or all this other stuff. And we just ignore this, really nothing. So you're like, oh, well, I actually don't know where we're going now. I love that, actually, that she just sort of throws us out and we have to...
Yeah, and she might just deliver a couple of words which are usually polar opposites, like real fantasy or raw luxury or all manner of things that would take ages to unpick, but she just delivers them like, very simply and gives you a lot to chew on.
I like that she kind of plays with the fashion system in that way. I think it's almost subversive, that whole the play with ugliness. It's almost like sometimes she's pushing the boundaries of what she can actually get away with aesthetically, I think, and I think that's only someone in her position could really get away with doing that a lot of the time, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, when I spoke at the Victoria and Albert Museum, I did a series of lectures on postmodernism there, and what postmodernism means in contemporary fashion, and she's up there. In terms of deliberately making things, that idea of self-conscious sort of all-knowing consumption, like Ralph Simmons with the parody of a shopping bag. And she makes things look deliberately tacky, like the earrings that I'm wearing. But people that aren't in fashion probably look at me and go, "Oh, they're really tacky." And I'm like, "You don't know how much they cost." And that's the in-joke. And whether I'm part of that joke or what, I'm part of that system. But it's kind of the irony, that postmodern irony.
Let's talk about this ugliness thing, because I think it's something that, it's so innate to what Miuccia Prada does, and something I'm really interested by. But I think it's something that we're seeing across fashion, whether it was that kind of the vogue for those ugly, clumpy shoes that exploded a few years back, or you could look at so many different items in this context, and a lot of designers play with it, whether it's kind of really striking, odd prints, or whether it's those strange, almost ironic slogans that we see, or the Celine fairy shoes. What does that come from? Is it this idea of kind of wanting to be in the know with your clothes, or is it just about kind of street style and people wanting to stand out? Where's this kind of the ugly item been born from? That's a really tough question. So if anyone has an answer, I'm really impressed.
As in, why is everyone wearing mum jeans? And
exactly. Why do people want to... Is that Man Repeller thing? Do you guys know that blog? Yeah. What's that been born from?
Well, it depends how you define ugly, really. Like, do you define ugly in terms of unflattering? Or do you define ugly in terms of not on trend, like something that's so new that it takes your eye a while to adjust? Or is it bad taste? Is it kitsch? Like, there's different elements, different levels of ugly, I think. And she plays with all of them at different times, I think.
And I think it's also about, particularly with Miuccia Prada, it's about moving outside of the tyranny of good taste, where everything is too pretty, too contrived, and so throw other elements in there which always kind of move you forward and you open your eyes to it again. It's a constant kind of palette challenge.
Again, I would say though, the Prada collections are not as ugly as a lot of the things you do see on the street at the moment. The things that you're talking about, these kind of extreme, they always have elements of classical beauty within them. They're always very aware of, they're pushing the boundaries, but they're not completely breaking through them and falling outside the system. And I guess that's also how they remain relevant.
But do you think it has the trickle down effect of the Prada aesthetic as what's caused those sort of real ugly looks that we're referring to? If you look at what a lot of London designers have been doing recently, whether it's with sort of huge quantities of embellishment or kind of striking print. Yeah, but it feels very Prada trickle down in a way.
Totally.
Yeah, I guess, but via perhaps Christopher Kane. I mean, she's also influenced other designers in that direction. So, and she's been doing the ugliness for a very long time. So it's maybe not the season-to-season trickle-down effect, but more of a general push of all of fashion in that direction that might come from there. Yes.
It's never that ugly when you're in the store, though.
No, this is true.
Miuccia Prada, let's not forget, there's Patrizio Bertelli, who is an extraordinary businessman who will make sure that it's actually very commercial. I mean, of all the shows that we see, this is one of the ones where the clothes have a kind of ka-ching factor, and sometimes that's the thing of translating it when you're sitting there. Like last season when it was all the bras over the top of coats, and I was sitting there going, well, you know, living in Kentish Town, North London, it doesn't matter how cold it is, I'm much more likely to see bras and no coats. You know, it's the idea that anyone's going to wear this, and then now you see how people are wearing it. That, you know, I think Anna Wintour was wearing one of those coats, didn't have the bra over the top. And even Anna Della Russo was wearing a sort of extraordinary Prada coat the other day. But even in, you know, that she takes things quite far, didn't have the bra over the top. So the ugly bit is something that keeps us entranced as we're watching the runway. But
is it mainly
very
in the
good at
styling, do you
translating
think? The ugliness in the styling rather than the actual...
Well, she uses deliberately, like, you know, she played around with man-made fabrics that were deliberately ugly. She's obsessed with 1950s man-made fabrics that are kind of, you know, those fabrics that you'd hate. She had that obsession with lace that season, and she hates lace. So she works with things that she hates. And she's like Alba Abaz in that sense. She'll challenge herself. He's like, I hate pink, so I'm going to work with pink. I hate love hearts, so I'm going to work with love hearts. And that kind of friction then creates her best work. So I think also to get away with ugliness, it is about a hierarchy of style. Not everybody can carry off ironing. You have to be at the very, very top to be able to carry that off. So it isn't.
Yeah, she challenges the wearer, doesn't she? I do agree with what you're saying, Marion, that I think, you know, you definitely wouldn't walk into a Prada store and see it as kind of a festival of ugliness, but she does challenge the wearer. I think those coats that you mentioned, it's a great example of that whole collection with all those huge mural and faces on it. That seemed to be about, you know, challenging a woman to be brave, to be confident, and I think that's always an interesting thing when a designer is challenging themselves and that trickles down.
Yeah, but like you said though, the accessories and everything are so jeweltastically mesmerising. It's so beautiful, her clothing, the colour and the sparkle. I mean, if you're a magpie, I mean, she's really, really embracing it at the moment. It's very positive.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about her aesthetic, because we mentioned great colour, we've mentioned this ugliness thing, but Prada's one of those shows where correct me if you guys disagree, but I think it does change a lot, you know, from season to season. You can get it, and it's a very sort of strong aesthetic message that you see each season, and you can look through the archive and it's a very strong idea. So it's very hard to kind of see a lot of synergy sometimes between the collections. But then you definitely would say that you can tell it's Prada, whether it's a banana print or this kind of strange minimal Hunger Games type uniform. What is it that ties Prada together? What underpins the Prada aesthetic? Again, huge question. No one wants to talk on the Prada panels because they're like, oh my god, it's absolutely terrifying.
Massive.
What do we expect from
bravery? What do we expect? The unexpected, bravery. What ties it together? I think if you see someone walking towards you that you know is really a fashion person and they're wearing something that you go, 99.9% likely it's going to be Prada. Print used in really unusual ways.
But it's interesting that she's moved away from print quite, like the recent menswear we saw where there was some amazing women's wear in that. It kind of overshone the menswear in the end. Everyone kind of said that in their reviews, and there wasn't print, and it was very sort of pared back in that sense. It was all about layering and fairs, and I think that's what's interesting. I guess that's what I'm getting at with the codes is you say one code, but I guess we say she goes left, she goes right thing. We say print, but then she'll do a whole collection that has no print, and it's quite hard to pin her down in that sense.
She does tend to have something that's always very recognisable. So if you do want to talk about that fashion person or that one thing that really it's almost so unique and recognisable it can't be copied, and that I think is quite an important part of it as well. It's not an aesthetic, it's maybe a way of working.
That's interesting.
Whether that's a certain floral print or the brass outside of the coat or whatever, there's that one element that you can't get away from, and that everyone will, even if you do copy it, people will go, oh, it's a Prada copy. It's not just some general trend.
So it's a very kind of considered, forced aesthetic statement. So it makes it hard to
It's
kind of
certainly
mimic.
uncompromising, whether it be a Hawaiian print. For me, I mean, in recent years, it's a constant ongoing fascination with the 1920s and 60s and the emancipation of women, really. So the 20s, the 60s and the 20s, Twiggy could have easily come from the 20s. She's engaging constantly with 20s silhouettes, and then the silhouettes of Courrèges and Pierre Cardin, and then you've got the bra on top. So the girl's burning the bra in the 60s. Now she's giving us back the bra. So for me, I see it more narrative based.
That's interesting. How do you see it, Harriet?
I think over and above the actual show, which is obviously the statement making, when you're actually in the store, there is a language there. There will always be a little sheer skirt of some type or semi-sheer, some fabulous cashmere knits, which she wears so well. Maybe a little 50s influence crepe suit or dress. Absolutely, of that silhouette. And I think those are within her lexicon and her sort of classics, things that she will revisit again and again and again on a commercial level. But I think, and those are populist and they're flattering and they're easy to wear, but they seem quintessentially Prada. So I think there's always a very good base. I think what's interesting, I remember interviewing her last year and she was saying what's difficult is to be elitist and populist at the same time. And she said it's very easy to make a beautiful dress, but it's not very easy to make a beautiful dress that's interesting. So she's always pushing herself to kind of give something a new edge or take things in a new direction.
Do we think it's a fashion person's brand in that respect? Because I found it interesting what you said, Marion, about if you see someone walking towards you wearing something that feels incredibly new and striking, 99% of the time it's Prada. In that respect, do we think it's a brand for fashion lovers rather than a brand for everyone?
I think the cleverness is it sort of is a brand for everyone. I mean, maybe all of us sitting here are quite different women, but we probably actually all own something that's Prada. So, I mean, that's kind of extraordinary. That's not usually the case when we're gathered here. So,
she's played the system well, like
she
said.
has.
She makes us feel like it's really kooky and like unobtainable in terms of style, but actually it's incredibly populist. Because, like you said, she's got those nylon bags. Like so many women had them in offices that weren't necessarily Prada. These types of girls that we're talking about right now. But my goodness, that was huge.
And even just like to use nylon in that respect, I think this goes back to what you were saying about the fabrication. She's always does manage to sort of move.
But again, it's a bit of it's a mockery of the system. It's a postmodern mockery. Will you pay this much for something that's made of nylon and be part of our club? And it's this idea of comments around materialism, as in consumption, and very political messages running through. But yet everybody's like, hey, it's Prada, but there's a lot. You can appreciate her clothes at two different levels.
It's like the ultimate in commodity fetishism.
Totally.
Which is quite a mark.
Speaking of that, has Prada really followed that extreme development where all the luxury brands have gone tenfold more expensive in recent years? I have almost a feeling Prada has gone relatively less expensive.
Miu Miu hasn't.
No.
Miu Miu's gone.
No, but I'm wondering, I'm not this, I don't have this, I don't have the statistics, but the way that other luxury fashion has really run with prices, I'm not quite sure
that's really
the development has been quite as extreme.
Because there was the thing last year where, you know, Chanel basically declared that they weren't going to make any more, they weren't going to add more numbers, but the way they were going to make more money was just to make everything more expensive.
And Burberry said exactly the same thing.
But I think Mulberry has done it now. There was an article about a Mulberry bag going kind of more expensive overnight in the shop, and just the same thing. And I'm not quite sure.
Prada has incredible growth. Like their profits last year was like 9% or something crazy. So I don't know if what their strategy is. I know they're focused.
Very good businessman. That's, you know, that's the thing. That
I think there's different price points to tap into. So you've got a broad, well, it's not super broad, but you've got a pretty broad customer base to appeal to. Because they might want to buy a classic black court shoe from Prada, or they're going to have some fabulous, luxurious, hand-embellished fur coat. You know, there's a real span that women can touch at, you know, different kind of budgets.
And it's interesting that some of the classic bags, they're so ubiquitous, but they feel kind of removed from what you see on the runway. You know, there's different Prada for different types of people. As Harriet says, there's the court shoe and just a simple black bag that you'll see on so many city women on the tube, but then there's kind of the bag from the show, and then you're like, you're a real Prada woman, and there's that nice kind of difference, isn't there?
Yeah.
And it's interesting just to go to the stream, because the set is the same that we saw at the men's. So the entire Prada show space, you know, she always does great theatre, but it's completely covered in this sort of felt wool, and they're incredible orchestra pits, which the models sort of move around. So it's still playing with that idea of performance that we saw with the menswear. And the set is actually really amazing. When I was out there for the men's show, and some of the audience are sat in the orchestra pits, which is incredible because you see it from a really different, strange angle. So we're seeing that again, which is nice. And the orchestra, I'm going to try and pronounce the name, which is going to be incredibly embarrassing. I'm going to apologise. But it's the Lusignolia Wind Orchestra.
Them.
Yeah, them. So that's what we're going to see.
Those old guys again.
Before the show starts, because it looks like it's about to begin, let's talk a little bit about theatre and fashion, because she does that really well, but in quite a quiet way. It never feels like a spectacle, but she always manages to sort of, you know, her sets are incredible, and she's been playing a lot with that. And given that, you actually do get a press release for the set now, which I think is quite interesting that she's
That's really cool.
Yeah, really cool.
I love the fact that you get a press release for the set, but
not the clothes.
clothes.
Yeah. But do we love to have something, it feels like such a solid aesthetic statement when you go in there, the whole show space is transformed. Do we love that a bit, that it's not just kind of a white runway?
Do you think that comes from, didn't she train as a mime?
Yeah, she
for a
did,
long time. Like that, it must come from that. I think that unspoken communication. I think in performance, I think is something that comes through in her collections very clearly.
Yeah, actually that's into, they're very performative, aren't they? It feels like going to it. Even the music is always fantastic.
She's obsessed with the cinema at the moment, so just lots and lots of cinematic referencing in terms of building mood, and I found it interesting with the references into sort of, you know, even David Lynch sort of films, you know, music that's being played, but actually it's a recording being played. It's always Mulholland Drive referencing. So even the sets are all very, very referenced with film. Yeah, it's really interesting.
But we like that when we're going to the shows. Is that part of the reason everyone looks forward to Prada so much?
That's what I mean. I love the fact that she talks about the set. Her work is art, and she views it as such. And the set says so much about who she is. So it's really great. Yeah.
I think it makes it an immersive experience for the audience, but also that's carried through to the stores. They're quite essential trip going into the stores as well. And I think everything's so beautifully choreographed, and the attention to detail is so rigorous. Yeah.
Harriet, you mentioned before though that your early memory was smell. I think that's really important with Prada. But almost as we're talking about it, it's like you can smell kind of the leather of the Milan store, but also the brilliant work she's done with perfume. I mean those perfume films, help me here, is it Wes Anderson?
Wes Anderson, yeah.
But the fact that in the last one, which was about the race car driver, it was only right at the very end, he walks up to the bar in that little Italian village and he's got Prada written on the back of his jacket. But selling without branding is so clever and done so well.
But I think that's quite an interesting thing with Prada, is it never feels like a branded brand, but then there's so much branding in the print and in you know, by the fact it's so seasonal in terms of those collections in that way, you look at things and you know that it's Prada Spring Summer 12 or Prada Autumn Winter 13, you know, you get that from it. I think that's quite an interesting way.
They use their logo quite a bit. I mean, it's not very anonymous, but it still
you wouldn't
feels...
see it on clothing, really.
No, no.
Which I think is quite...
Well, for me, the rainbow at the moment is the logo. Yeah, the rainbow on the coat. It's like, it couldn't be more screams Prada, but
How do we think she's changed fashion? We talked about her influence a little bit before, but I want to talk about that a bit more because we do a lot of panels, but for those designers, you know, the move fashion and the ones that, you know, Milan Fashion Week is all about Prada. So I'm interested for those designers, whether it's Marc Jacobs or Miuccia Prada, what we think their influence on fashion has been and will be. What do we think it is in Miuccia's case? Do you think it's about making fashion seem intellectual? Is it purely an aesthetic influence? What's been her biggest impact on the industry? Really I'm making this a difficult panel.
Fashion and art, her fusion of fashion and art, and making, which now seems so natural, but it wasn't. And the way that she's married these two different disciplines together, so that we all we know about what we're going to see is it's going to be artistic. That's, and I don't know if that was true before Miuccia Prada, that they were so linked.
it's really interesting because she actually hates fashion, and when, you know, her family asked for her to take over the label, she was like, no, I hate fashion, I can't abide it. So she's changed it so that she loves it. So it suits her, yeah.
It's interesting because we've talked a lot about some of her opinions, and you say she hates fashion. We talked about her political leanings, how sort of her, you know, she has a background in communism. She's very left wing in lots of respects. But can you work in high fashion and be sort of that political bent? Is that actually possible? You know, high fashion, it's about selling, it's about consumerism, it's elitist.
It's very difficult. I find it difficult as a forecaster because I have leanings, just like a designer has leanings. Everybody has, you know, you're a tastemaker, but she's an activist as well. And I can imagine it's very, very challenging, but she's making it her life's mission to be able to combine them both.
I think if you compare it to the way that someone like Vivienne Westwood is involved, as she really wears it on her sleeve, I think Miuccia Prada is a lot more subtle, and in that way it's kind of more revolutionary, I think. Like, you know, Vivienne Westwood's, when she has a political message, it's so clear, and it is so clearly at odds with the idea of consumerism a lot of the time, I feel. Whereas with Prada, you feel like she's playing the system and she's subverting the system from the inside in a much cleverer way, I think.
Yeah, she's more in line with Raf. You're right, I think that when Vivienne's, I don't know with Vivienne. I feel suspicious sometimes when someone's really pushing things in your face so much.
Oh, I feel the opposite with Vivienne. I think it's so heartfelt. It's actually, to me, it's the opposite really of suspicious, because I think Vivienne just goes out there and goes, I'll do this, and you know, she's been doing it a long time, so it's not like she doesn't know there's going to be a backlash, but she's like, do it anyway. And Miuccia's much more thoughtful.
I do respect her, and I do agree. I just, I'm kind of just interested. I'm just playing devil's advocate with myself.
I don't think it's disingenuous with Vivienne Westwood. I just think that possibly Miuccia Prada's approach is maybe more successful, I think, in the way that she does it more conceptually. It's quieter, yeah. I think the way that Westwood does it can be a lot more confrontational and makes people immediately kind of go, how can you be a high fashion brand and be anti-consumerist? Like, how does that work? Whereas I think Prada asks more questions about it.
I think that Westwood's a wonderful marketeer, and I think that she is a great...
We have some fashion coming.
Oh. Wow.
Amazing boots.
So the set's so plain compared to last time. When there's that
but of course she's the
painting
one to
everywhere.
take us out of that universe with lots of embellishments and lots of patterns. I mean, she's the one who will go in the opposite direction.
Oh well, they've changed the pits even more. At the men's, the models didn't walk down to the same level as the audience. You were just kind of in a pit and they were walking almost above you. So they've moved that around.
she has the advantage of that fantastic space.
Oh, it's incredible.
sounds almost like the Velvet Underground.
Yeah.
Strings.
I like it.
Is it like wedges?
Always a really good shoe, good ugly triangle shoe,
Yeah, with
which
the
I
big
enjoy.
And a
triangle.
sock.
But also the fact that their camera goes straight to that shoe. Because
Yeah.
what's your first question looking at a Prada show? I wonder what the shoe's like. So now we know.
Yeah.
I like the darkness to this as opposed to the sort of optimism that we had last season. You know, this it's very similar to what we saw at the men's, this kind of raggedy cinematic feel where the pieces are really perfect, but they have this kind of slightly distressed, ragged feel about them, which I think there's something really beautiful in that.
I love the feel of this raw edge and the sheer. There's something very fantastically Prada perverse in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said
I
earlier.
love that. Sorry to interrupt. Prada perverse.
Prada perverse, I was going to say that's a really good.
Hashtag.
You can tell the writer on the.
But like
I
you
can
said,
see
Harriet, the shears, and
Yeah.
that kind of lingerie sort of, it's like 1930s kind of feel coming through the cinematic.
So even that's quite perverse. That men and women tend to be separate in most fashion shows. And
She does that a lot now, which I really love.
I really like it.
I wonder when, I always talk about this, and I guess it's not going to happen because it just wouldn't fit with timing, but why we don't just see men and women's together. It seems. That's everything I want to look like every day. So incredible.
But like you said, Harriet, the substantial coat, you know, the kind of all the beautiful weight that's there, but yet they're wearing it with a real sheer kind of weight.
I love that look of a silk satin nothingy with a heavy shearling coat on
Yeah.
top. And everything's quite outsized.
It is.
And that amazing purple is so regal, isn't it?
I think her palette, we did touch on this at the start, but her palette and her colours, like even that, she does brown so well,
Yeah.
you know, she's so great with colours, especially autumnal
That
colours.
mustardy colour as well is lovely.
She's kind of taken the rainbow from last season and kind of
Yeah,
worked
exactly.
it
It really
through.
follows onto that.
And it feels more autumnal, but it's rich,
Yeah.
isn't it?
And it's kind of paired with the darkness from spring
Yeah.
It's interesting.
last year with the black dresses and flowers.
Yeah. I like that the mood changes a lot with Prada, you know, optimism, pessimism, darkness.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
really intriguing.
Very similar to Mark in that respect.
Yeah. I think there's so many parallels that you can draw between the two, because obviously he's such a huge fan of seeing print, which is good given our discussion.
Who is this?
It's Barbara Sukawa. Her.
Prince is so gorgeous.
I love that we're seeing really good knee-high boots. We talked a lot about this in the Gucci discussion that we did.
Yeah.
I'm a real fan of a good boot.
And lots of trompe-l'oeil kind of sort of stuff coming through there with the print and also with the wedge.
But it is interesting, that question that you asked, what is it that kind of makes it so clearly Prada? The dresses we've seen, for example, they're weirdly flattering and unflattering at the same time.
Yeah.
It's just slightly off, but never so much off that they don't look flattering.
Maybe that is it, it's that
It's like,
offish thing.
yeah,
And it's proportion as well, isn't it? Like everything just seems like a little bit oversized, and I think there's something quite Prada about that, and that it's just very
Just a
slightly
tiny bit.
jarring initially. You're kind of like,
Yeah.
oh.
That's beautiful.
So one rule of Prada is often the more difficult it is to, this is my own rule, the more difficult it is to understand when you first see it, the more chic the bags will be that season. So I'm just trying to see whether that's true. We haven't had so many good bag shots thus far, but I'm expecting the bags will be quite plain.
Although we saw
I'll
one,
be
it was
enjoying
almost
the
satchel.
gold
yeah.
one with
Yeah.
But in
small
shape.
hardware, yeah.
I'm going to be proved spectacularly wrong, aren't I?
No, that looks great, the one she's carrying there.
So the bags are always really ladylike.
Yeah.
They don't maybe follow the controversy of the rest of the clothes design.
I saw that she was doing the campaign with Edward Denham for this
Yeah,
iconoclast
the
stuff.
iconoclast stuff.
And they put hashtag like iconic, hashtag kind of experimental, so it's like what we were talking about earlier on. All of these pieces are classic but yet they're a bit off and
Bit off,
experimental
yeah.
at the same time.
No, that's very true, actually. I've thought a lot about the kind of aesthetic she's doing at the moment, because this is, it's very much drawn from the men's that we saw, and it's interesting because, I kind of like, there's something quite down and out about it, especially in the styling, this idea of sort of, an old lady wearing all of her best jewellery, or someone putting on all of their best clothes for a Sunday, and that look, we just saw that really short piece with the coat on top. There's something a little bit, it's that perverse thing again, it feels like
It has got that kind of 1929 Wall Street crash, 30s kind of vibe, like you said,
I do think, less in this, but in the previous collection, she did talk about feminism as a reference, and it is, I think it speaks about that incredibly complex experience of being a woman today, because you do have to take on so many different roles. You can't just be one thing the way that maybe women could up until the 50s, and that kind of addition of just a lot of different elements in each piece and in each styled look. I think it's really, isn't it that we have to go in and out of many different things and be many different people. I do think also, you asked about what she's added, and I think fashion today, there are very few things that are as important as this idea of a strong woman. That's what fashion speaks about today. So many different fashion designers have their interpretation. I think that's what she introduced. The strong woman at the center of fashion is something incredibly important. I think we owe her thanks for that. And I also think that's how she's paid her dues somehow for being a fashion designer and an activist, because if you manage to do that, I think then you're fine. You're even with whatever.
I love that. No, that is interesting, and I feel like in recent seasons we've seen her explore a different kind of woman as well. While it's always about a strong woman, especially with Miu Miu, you see her kind of, it's not a strong woman in a kind of a power dressing working woman always. With Miu Miu we see a younger woman, we see the girl, and I think that's interesting with her, that she's
in line with this new wave of feminism, which obviously I'm crazy about, which is this idea of embracing the right to be a girl and to be fragile and to be vulnerable, but at the same time to be strong, but
or be weak if you want.
But be weak, but so much more complex than just being strong. It's that one-dimensional feminism. Now it's so interesting.
Exactly. It's trickled down into being, everyone should be an Amazon. And obviously, for Miuccia Prada, it's something much more complex. The strong woman has got so many more sides to her, and she's obviously got a lot of days in her life when she's weak, when she feels terrible. She'll just try and explore that actual experience of being a woman in a really, really interesting way, I think.
Yeah, I think I really agree. And I love that conversation that you get between Prada and Miu Miu, because I think that's so about femininity. It's so interesting to see that.
She's kind of the girl coming up from the right.
Royal colours there.
I love the overall. They do look as though they're appearing from some sort of radical think tank. They're quite earnest women, but with a sort of intellectual strength.
Well, it's, the suffragettes, the Bloomsbury set, all those girls from days gone by that have been radicals.
So the Bloomsbury set, what a different take from Burberry's Bloomsbury. We're in the same era. Why is that? Why are we looking at that?
That's such a good bag. Sorry to put
bag.
It's
like a men's chain bag.
So good.
Sorry, go ahead.
You can get all your
That's what I'm
important
wondering.
feminist
Why we're
documents in
looking
that.
at Bloomsbury now?
Well, I think it's interesting with that theme because no disrespect to Burberry, with Prada, it's when she deals with a theme, I think it's different to when any other designer, apart from maybe Marc Jacobs, deals with a theme, is it never feels shoehorned in or tacked on. It almost feels like naturally that's what she was thinking about this season.
It's intellectually, it's got integrity about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's like the red, a sort of Otto Dix red-haired woman, but it's become a dress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wild redhead.
There is something, it's strange because while there's something quite sort of playful and sensual about the collection, there's also something very scholarly about
Scholarly,
it.
it's a good word, yes. So there's ties and the
That's
sort
what I
of
mean
feel
about
of
that
uniform.
kind of lesbian chic coming through from the Bloomsbury set. It's that kind of bookish.
Yeah, definitely.
And those
bookish.
really oversized, exaggerated V-necks are really reminiscent of that sort of 20s tennis
Totally,
wear.
yeah.
Or even just, like sort of college sweater, that idea of uniform, I think is interesting.
Totally, with the chevrons earlier
Yeah.
on and that kind of
Completely.
sportswear 70s thing.
Where are stylists going to be like now at the show on their phones thinking, I've got to book? Presumably Charleston's already booked because Burberry's going to be shooting there, but where are they going to start shooting this?
The thing about Prada is she'll push it probably in another direction
Yeah.
for the
But I'm wondering
campaign.
more about not her campaign,
the stylists.
but the stylists who are sitting there going, "Oh, I love that piece. It's 30s. I'm going to shoot
That's what I
at the
like. You
Chrysler
can see it in so
Building
many
or
different
something."
ways.
Yeah.
You can see it shot in kind of some old library. You can see it shot in a kind of very sensual outdoors setting, of an evening, a woman coming back from a night out. There's that kind of duality to it, I think, and that's what I think. What's good with Prada is it's almost sort of. It's the writers and the stylists' dream in that sense because it gives you think how many references and ideas we've thrown out from it, and I think if you were a stylist it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that's what she's added to fashion? She's managed to somehow make intellectual sexy. Maybe that's
Definitely.
what she's added.
But it's
You
interesting
can
that
just pick out, I don't know, you can theme it so differently. You can make it all about red and picking out all just
Yeah.
the very flashing red parts and do something in, I don't know, a red studio. It's got so many
It's so
elements
complex
to it.
because, if I was a stylist, I'd be sitting there thinking, how could I transform this and find another side to the collection, like you said, because there's all these shears, oh my goodness, if you pulled it apart.
I think also, I wrote about this in my men's review, so I'm repeating myself, but I think there's something very playful about what she's doing with this idea of performance and the fact they're walking and they're standing on these little stages and there's an orchestra pit, so it's that cinematic thing we were talking about. But in the way that fashion works at the moment, to treat a fashion show as a performance where, someone wearing this amazing coat stops and stands, there's such an irony to that if you think about being at the shows and what a performance they are, and if you think how many women will have stood outside the show wearing Prada from last season in front of all those photographers like they're on a stage. There's a real irony to that, a playfulness to sort of the way they pause and stop. I just think there's something very funny in that.
That's the great privilege, though, of going to shows, that you can have 11 fantastic theatrical experiences in a day. And this is a real show of more than just clothes coming up and down at you. It's very thought-provoking, isn't it?
She'll have been thinking about stuff like that as well, though, Lou. Do you remember she did the Miu Miu X Factor thing? And she rifted up the X Factor and had Simon Cowell. She's and that's the great thing about her. And that's what makes her so great in terms of the highbrow and the lowbrow.
It's that Karl Lagerfeld
that
thing.
Karl Lagerfeld, that pastiche, and
It's that thing, if people are interested in it, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And then you see what you can do with it. I mean, I guess the light as well is very theatrical. It's very
completely, the spotlight.
the spotlight is following the models through.
And she's speaking a lot at the moment about isolation, and and it is very they're on their own in that spotlight,
Well, there's not the uniformity that we see in a lot of Prada collections, where every model is very sort of reminiscent of the next. This feels a lot more. It's back to what Harriet said, but it feels like they're a sort of a gang united in mind rather than aesthetic, which is nice.
I really like that. Yeah. Feels like tons of old Prada vintage that she's just picked up through the, like you said, the racks. It's not actually like a collection.
Well, that kind of greatest hits collection she did for recently, that was so great.
I mean, I've never seen a sort of fur-trimmed sheer slip dress before, so this is really exciting.
Yeah. She always does something new, doesn't she? And it's kind of like, it's that thing where you'll revisit this collection in images, or you'll watch the video and you'll see it in store and you'll get something new from it every time. And
definitely, so many layers.
Completely.
So well researched.
The trim on the sheer dresses looks almost aggressive.
Yeah.
So, it's as if it would be too heavy and just tear that
Like it would
super fine material apart.
But to take something like something sheer, that could be so about making the girl look pretty and sensual and appealing to a man, and make it look uncomfortable. There's something really great in that, I think. Those jackets are just amazing.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah. See, I mean, again, it's taking that thing that is already a trend, the shearling jacket, but just turning it into something very other.
But they're bad taste jackets. They're in the similar vein of the medium coat off kind of 70s bad taste sort of vibe that they've done.
But I think it can be very easy to do bad taste and make it look new. You see that a lot in London, do something deliberately ugly, but with her, we talked a lot about ugliness, but it doesn't feel kind of gimmicky ever. You never look at something and it feels...
No.
Well, she redefines taste in a way. I mean, good taste is a very scary thing.
Wow, they liked it.
And she does look like a fantastic professor, doesn't she?
Yeah. It's like going to a lecture in some ways, isn't it? You want to go learn from. I love that you said you learned from her.
Yeah, if you didn't know and you were thinking, what's the designer going to look like when they come out?
Yeah.
If you were doing a police photo fit, you would never draw her. Would you?
I don't know, who would you draw?
I don't know.
I do think
she's still we expect it, but it is quite unexpected that the librarian lady comes out, but looking, so lovely.
I love that. I just love her. She's brilliant, isn't she?
Yeah, she's brilliant.
We're all filled with such love. Should more designers be like her, do you think? Do we wish, or is that what makes her
special? I think she's one of a kind.
Yeah. One of a kind.
Absolutely.
But does that worry?
I miss having Lee McQueen around, and I do think that he was on her level in terms of research.
But it's a very different thing.
No, and I'm not saying that, and I don't want a carbon copy of her, but in terms of that emotion and that depth of research and that desirability teamed with intellectual premise.
I think that's something that we've touched on a lot throughout this panel, and it is perhaps, I think, what I find most interesting about her as we've kind of discussed that, the sort of easy desirability of it mixed with that real heavy intellectual side. I think that's a really tough balance to manage to get.
Yeah, no, it's also such a strength being able to do that much research and being that interested in the world, but then ignoring it when you actually make your choices in what you want to do. That's a very difficult thing, I think, for any artist or any creative. How much can you take in without becoming that other thing that you're looking at? And she's obviously very strong in that sense.
So was this a strong collection for her, do we think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm
and
not
so
sure
desirable.
She does weak collections.
Yeah, no.
I'm not sure.
I love the idea of that loose silk satin shirt dress and the big coat. I mean, it's all it's nice. There's a fluidity and freedom to it, which feels so right now.
Definitely, actually. But I think that's an interesting point, that she never does a weak collection. She does collections that I think wow people, and she does collections that wow people less, but she never does something that doesn't feel good, or she never has an off season in that sense, does she?
And the fact that the shoes this time are so delicate, aren't they? They're so sort of delicate and pretty. With
there's a real contrast, because she did the big kind of clumpy boot with the wedge that you can see in the background of number 6, but then she did these slightly
sort
more
of T-bar and wedges, graphic wedges.
I mean, all throughout New York Fashion Week, everyone's been saying this thing that you can't be warm and fashionable at the same time, and she proves everyone wrong. Because I think you'd be very warm in some of those things, even with just a sheer dress underneath.
Yeah, the coat's fantastic.
But again, she's working in a pair of decades here, and this is 30s, 70s, all those kinds of the T-bar, the bounce, they're prevalent in both decades. Which is great.
The sheer is even more striking actually when you go through in the images, isn't it? They looked more wrapped up when you saw them in bits.
Yeah, and also, I mean, they're on top of other things, and can we go back, or is
can we go back a little bit?
That purple colour of the sheer dress is just amazing. It's like electric purple.
It's really intense, isn't it? I love all these kinds of sort of autumnal, like these aubergines and all that moss green. but then she's got these primaries, but very rich coming through as well. And I think there was at menswear as well, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Those kind of really strong,
really, especially in
red.
the women's that we saw at the men's. That was where the real pop colours
Yeah.
kind of came through. But I think that's, for me, one of my favourite things about this collection is the palette, because it's all familiar Prada hues, but it's just so diverse, this palette, you know, as you said, with the rainbow brights.
I mean, look, this alongside that jar, you've got that beautiful kind of autumnal chestnut, and then you've got the saturated yellow, red and purple.
I think these are some of my favourite looks. That
They're incredible, yeah.
absolutely beautiful. I just wanted a wall. I love Prada. So good. It's a hard question to ask actually, but like I think she's in this point in fashion where, you know, she's so integral to fashion, so integral to Milan fashion, so integral to fashion as a whole, so integral to Prada. You know, often I think there'll probably be countless young people interested in fashion who would think of Prada as Miuccia Prada. They wouldn't even know about the heritage of her grandfather, the luggage side of it. It feels almost like it's completely hers. What happens afterward? Like, who could? People often talk about this with Chanel. Who could go there? But who could go to Prada? No one even really thinks about it in the way that we're always talking about who could go to Chanel after Lagerfeld, but who could go to Prada?
Somebody else with a PhD in philosophy and who's an ex-mime.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, you've got designers that are kind of being, you know, they're inspired by her, like Kane, but Kane isn't. That's an aesthetic thing, and I'm not saying, you know, he's an intelligent guy, but like you said, to find her so meaningful.
Start hanging around philosophy schools and the mime class.
Yeah,
I actually used to do mime when I was younger. So
David Bowie.
Are you the next designer at Prada? This is amazing news.
I am.
The only person I could think of would be David Bowie. He's a trained mime artist.
Yeah, there we go.
And he's the only person that's as cool as her in my eyes.
David Bowie for Prada.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that designers of a certain generation, they need and have to think about the legacy. What happens?
Definitely.
What happens 10, 15 years down the line? How do they keep that name alive or pass it on in good hands? It must be terribly worrying trying to plan out into the future.
I wonder with her, you never hear, you know, I guess she's a different sort of kettle of fish to Lagerfeld, but you hear him a lot talking of his admiration for other young designers, you know, whether it's Jeremy Scott or Heide Ackermann. He's very sort of vocal with it, but you never really hear her engaging with those kind of discussions.
I think it's because he's trying to mess with our heads. Because he's been old for as long as we can remember. There's that thing of,
but has got younger.
We've always been talking about.
Yeah, he's getting younger, rather,
you know. He's been doing it since 1983. That's a long time. There's probably someone here is not even born in 1983. You know, it's a long time. So yeah, he messes with us. He throws those people out just to then look the other. So really, he's looking the other way.
Well, how about if she just shut up shop when she died? Because
that's what I feel
kind of
like
think she could do that. I mean, she's very into the idea of temporal, ephemeral thing. You know, with the 24-hour nightclub that she did in Paris a few years ago, and
the
she
little
views
Miu Miu
this
club that they did here, you know, as a weekend.
Yeah, she views this as art. Artists don't think who's going to be me when I die. There's just one you.
But it is also a family brand, isn't it? And that's why she came. It's like it's like a heritage family brand, and that's why she was brought in. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if she just did the complete left field thing and brought someone in from outside fashion, like she was kind of outside fashion,
an architect or painter or whatever.
That's the only. Logic has no real meaning in terms of Prada. That's the only logical conclusion.
The shut up shop thing doesn't work anymore. You know, once you have.
Because someone will reopen it.
Not when you've got a company that's got shareholders.
Exactly.
She's private. She's privately owned, though, right?
No, because they've now.
They've just floated. That's right. Of course. Oh well, that's good as that.
It's interesting. She's just been now joint CEO with Bertelli.
Yeah.
But they said that wasn't a sort of a meaningful. I think they said it was very much just to comply with sort of
the Hong Kong.
Yeah, exactly. Which is. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that though, because I think. Yeah, it's not as simple as it just being, you know, her brand. You know,
but I think what you
said
was really interesting, especially with the Prada Foundation and so much that she does within. You know, she's a credible curator. That she may very well just bring in somebody that's a curator or an
Well, I
architect.
am available if they want to bring a journalist.
Me too, babe.
But we're wowed by this. Has this got us excited about Prada? Got us excited about Milan? We're all going to go and scratch our heads, which I guess is the
But again, though, I'll be looking at it and again, and that's the thing.
You'll have to email me and feedback on your week reflection of Prada afterwards.
Once a week.
Yeah, exactly. New thoughts.
Yeah, really like it.
Really like it then.
Yeah,
We'll have
definitely
to.
exciting.
I mean, look at that coat. It's perfect. The one on the right, love it.
But it's that thing we were saying, isn't it? It's that perfect combination between just beautiful, perfect things, and it's given us an amazing discussion about so many varied topics. And it's there's a real skill to make clothes that just are absolutely beautiful. Do that, I think. Especially given we didn't even have any show notes. You know, that she's not prompting us. She's not making life easy.
I think. I've heard it said that she's in some transition stage at the moment this season because it feels quieter. But you know, like you said, it's not a transition. It's just a different side of her. But I do think it's interesting that she's picking these greatest hits, or it is very eclectic.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult to do.
But I kind of like that with it. I think.
Yeah. No. Totally.
Yeah. It's a head scratcher, this one, though, isn't it?
It is definitely, which is why we like it.
And what else are we excited about for Milan? It's always a really cruel question. Or is now Prada's over, are we done?
I'm excited about Stella Jean, who is
showing,
you know, on the last day, and you know the tradition was you left after Armani, so hopefully she'll make people stay and let's see where she's going. I mean, that's a whole new side of Italian fashion to have a designer that's, you know, Roman but of Haitian Italian heritage, and
incredibly interesting.
It's a very different take. So good to see what she does.
Something to stay for.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for helping me talk about how great Prada is. I could do it all day, but it's been lovely to do it with you five. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well done,
Thank
Prada.
you.
Amazing.